I inherited a piece of land everyone said was worthless, but my grandfather's final warning made me question everything. Before we start, join our YouTube family by subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, let's get into the story. They said the canyon was worthless, and for most of my life I had learned to believe what people said, about things and about people. It was easier that way, easier to accept small expectations than to chase after something bigger and fail. My father never believed in small expectations. That was why he left. That was why I stayed. Until the letter came. It arrived folded twice, edges worn as if it had traveled through more than just distance. My name was written on it, in a hand I hadn't seen in nearly 10 years. Rough and uneven, but unmistakably his. I remember staring at it for a long time before opening it. Like the paper itself might burn me with whatever truth waited inside. He was gone. That much was clear in the first line. No apology, no explanation. Just a statement, simple and final. And then, beneath it, the part that made no sense at all, he had left me land, a canyon, somewhere far from everything I had ever known. Worthless land. According to the note attached by the lawyer who delivered it, barren, unusable, no timber, no value, not worth the ink it took to sign it over. The man had muttered as he handed me the deed. I almost didn't go, but something in me, something stubborn and buried, deep, refused to let it end like that. If this canyon was the last thing my father had touched, then I needed to see it, even if it meant proving that he had wasted his life chasing nothing. The journey took days. By the time I arrived, the world I knew felt like a distant memory, replaced by endless stretches of dry land and jagged rock formations that clawed at the sky. The canyon revealed itself slowly, like it had no interest in being found. When I finally stood at its edge, looking down into its depths, I felt something I couldn't quite name. Not disappointment, not anger, something heavier, silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until your own thoughts sound too loud. I made my way down carefully, boots sliding over loose gravel, hands brushing against rough stone for balance. The deeper I went, the more the outside world seemed to disappear. The air grew still. The light dimmed. The canyon walls rose higher, closing me in. It felt like stepping into a place forgotten by time. I walked for hours that first day, searching for anything, any sign that my father had seen something here worth claiming, but there was nothing. No tracks, no tools, no structures, just endless rock and dust. Worthless. The word echoed in my mind, louder with every step. By the time the sun began to set, I was ready to leave. I remember standing there, looking back the way I had come, feeling foolish for making the journey at all. Maybe everyone had been right. Maybe my father had been chasing ghosts until the end. I turned to go, and that's when the ground gave way beneath me. It wasn't a dramatic fall, just a sudden shift, a patch of loose earth collapsing under my weight. I slid down a short incline, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the breath out of me. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. As I lay there trying to understand what had just happened, when the dust settled, I pushed myself up slowly. Wincing as pain shot through my shoulder, I was in a narrow crevice, hidden from the main path by jagged rock. If I hadn't fallen, I never would have seen it. At first, I thought it was just another crack in the stone. Then I noticed the lines, carved, precise, intentional. I moved closer, brushing away dirt with trembling fingers. The shape became clearer, circles split down the middle by a jagged line, almost like lightning frozen in stone. Beneath it were markings I didn't recognize, arranged in a way that suggested meaning, but offered none. My heartbeat quickened. This wasn't natural. Someone had been here, not just passing through, but leaving something behind. For a long time, I just stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. A part of me wanted to dismiss it, to say it was nothing more than an old carving left by travelers or wanderers, but another part of me, the part that had brought me here, despite everything knew better, this meant something. And if it meant something, then the canyon wasn't worthless. Not entirely. That night, I didn't leave. I made a small camp near the entrance, my mind racing too fast for sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the carving again, its strange symmetry, the deliberate cuts in the stone. I kept thinking about my father, about the way he used to talk about opportunity, about hidden things waiting to be discovered. If you were willing to look deeper than everyone else, I had always dismissed those words as foolish dreams. Now, I wasn't so sure. By morning, something in me had changed. The canyon no longer felt like a burden I had inherited. It felt like a question, and I had no choice but to answer it. I returned to the crevice as soon as the light touched the canyon walls. The carving looked different in daylight, sharper, more defined, as if the sun itself was trying to reveal its details. I studied it from every angle, tracing the lines again and again, committing them to memory. If there was one carving, there could be more. That thought settled into my mind with quiet certainty, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: curiosity. Not the fleeting kind that passes in a moment, but something deeper, something that pulls you forward, even when you don't understand why. I spent the rest of the day searching, slowly, carefully, paying attention to details I would have ignored before the way. Certain rocks were positioned, the patterns in the canyon walls, the subtle differences in texture and color. By afternoon, I found another, smaller this time, fainter, hidden beneath, a ledge that cast a constant shadow over it. The same symbol, the same split circle, but with a slight variation in the markings. Below, my pulse quickened again. This wasn't random, this was a pattern, and patterns meant intention. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the canyon floor, I stood there between the two carvings, feeling the weight of what I had discovered. This place wasn't empty, it wasn't forgotten, it was hiding something. And whatever it was, my father had known. For the first time since reading that letter, I didn't feel anger toward him. I felt something closer to understanding. Maybe he hadn't been running away. Maybe he had been searching. And now, without meaning to, I had started searching too. I looked back at the carving one last time, the jagged line splitting the circle catching the fading light, just enough to make it seem almost alive. And a thought crept into my mind, quiet but impossible to ignore. What if this canyon wasn't worthless? What if I just hadn't learned how to see it yet? And as the last light of day disappeared behind the canyon walls, I realized something that sent a strange thrill through my chest. This was only the beginning. The door didn't open icily. For a second, I thought it was stuck for good, sealed by time dust. And whatever years had passed since anyone last stepped inside, I pushed harder, the wood groaning in protest, until suddenly it gave way with a sharp crack that echoed through the canyon. The sound lingered longer than it should have, as if the place itself had noticed me. I stepped inside slowly. The air changed immediately. Outside, the canyon had felt dry and still. Inside, it felt preserved. Not fresh, not clean, but untouched. Like time had slowed down here, waiting patiently for someone to return. A thin layer of dust covered everything, but beneath it, there was order. Careful order. Shelves lined the walls, carved directly into the rock. Papers were stacked, tied, pinned, layered on top of each other. Old tools rested in corners, their handles worn smooth from use. And everywhere I looked, notes, dozens, hundreds, my grandfather's handwriting. I didn't recognize it at first. It had been so long, but something about the uneven letters, the way certain words were pressed harder into the page. It clicked. This was his. He hadn't disappeared. He had been here. A strange feeling hit me then, not quite anger, not quite relief. Something in between, something unfinished. You left for this, I muttered, picking up one of the papers. It was filled with markings, lines, arrows, numbers. Rough sketches of the canyon walls. At first glance, it looked chaotic. But the longer I stared at it, the more I realized it wasn't random. It was a map, not of the surface, of something underneath. My eyes moved quickly across the room, scanning more pages. Different sections of the canyon, repeated symbols, coordinates, depth markings, and one phrase, over and over again. It's not dry, it's hidden. I frowned. Hidden what? My voice sounded small in the space. I stepped further inside, boots crunching lightly against the dirt-covered floor. My fingers brushed against the walls, following the pinned notes like they were breadcrumbs leading me somewhere. There had to be a reason for all this. No one spends years mapping a dead canyon unless they know something no one else does. That's when I heard it, so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. Drip. I froze. My breath caught, and I tilted my head slightly. Silence. Then, drip, drip. It was real. A tiny sound, easy to miss, But once you noticed it, it was impossible to ignore. Water. My heart started pounding. "That's not possible," I whispered, even as my feet were already moving. I followed the sound deeper into the structure, past stacks of papers and rusted tools, toward the back where the rock wall curved inward slightly. The sound grew clearer. Drip. There, a narrow crack ran through the rock, thin and almost invisible unless you were looking directly at it. I crouched down, bringing my face closer. Another drop of water formed slowly, then fell, ... I stared at it, like I had just witnessed something impossible. "This place is supposed to be dry," I said under my breath, but it wasn't, at least, not completely. I reached out and touched the rock near the crack. It felt cooler than the surrounding surface. Alive? A strange energy rushed through me, not just excitement, but something deeper, something personal. All those years I had spent feeling stuck, like nothing in my life moved forward, like everything was already decided for me. And here was this place, hiding something beneath the surface, waiting for someone to see it. I grabbed the nearest tool I could find, a metal rod, slightly bent but still solid, and pressed it against the crack. "Let's see what you were trying to show me," I muttered. I pushed. At first, nothing happened. Then a small piece of rock broke away. I pushed again. Another crack. Dust fell. Tiny fragments scattered across the ground. My breathing grew faster. My hands tightened around the rod as I drove it harder into the weak point. Come on. Another strike. And then a sudden burst. Water forced its way through the crack, spilling out in a thin but steady stream. It hit the ground with a soft splash, instantly darkening the dry soil beneath it. I stumbled back, startled. No way. I dropped the rod and stepped closer again, this time slower, more careful. The water continued to flow, not violently, but consistently. Real, clear, cold. I reached out and let it run over my fingers. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it. Everything inside me felt different. This wasn't just a discovery. It was proof that the canyon wasn't what it seemed. Proof that my grandfather hadn't been chasing nothing. Proof that maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong about more than just this place. I looked back at the notes scattered around the room. They weren't random, I said quietly. They were instructions. Suddenly, the symbols made sense. The markings outside, the repeated lines, they weren't just maps. They were guides, showing exactly where to look, exactly where to break, exactly where the canyon was hiding its secrets. I let out a slow breath, running a hand through my hair. This changes everything. But even as I said it, I knew something else. If there was one hidden source, there had to be more. I turned back toward the doorway, looking out at the canyon with new eyes. Not empty, not worthless, just undiscovered. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Real, undeniable purpose. I stepped outside, the sunlight hitting my face again, but it didn't feel the same as before. Nothing did, because now I knew the truth. This canyon wasn't dead. It was waiting. Waiting for someone who wouldn't give up after the first look. Waiting for someone who would dig deeper. Waiting for me. I clenched my fists slightly, feeling the weight of that realization settle in. ... Then I looked back at the flowing water one more time, and a new thought hit me. If one crack could release this much, how much more was hidden beneath everything I hadn't even touched yet? I didn't leave the canyon, not that day, not the next. Something had shifted inside me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't running from uncertainty. I was walking straight into it. The person who had arrived here, tired and ready to sell everything for quick relief, felt like someone else entirely, because now I knew this place had value, not imagined value, not emotional value, real value. The kind people overlook because it doesn't scream for attention, the kind you only find when you're willing to stay longer than everyone else. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the canyon again, watching the early light stretch across the jagged rock walls. But this time, I wasn't seeing dryness. I was seeing patterns. I was seeing clues. I was seeing what my grandfather had spent years trying to understand. I climbed down again faster this time, more confident. My body had already started adapting, learning the rhythm of the path, the balance it required. At the bottom, I didn't hesitate. I started searching. Every marking on the wall now meant something. Every carved line pointed somewhere. I followed them carefully, Comparing what I saw outside with the notes inside the wooden structure, it wasn't random. It was a system, a map hidden in plain sight. Hours passed without me noticing. I traced symbols, checked positions, counted steps, measured distances the same way he had. And then I found another one, a crack, smaller than the first, almost invisible. If I hadn't known what to look for, I would have walked right past it. My heart started beating faster again. "This is it," I whispered. I grabbed the metal rod I had carried with me, this time, and pressed it against the rock. For a moment, I hesitated, not because I was unsure, but because I knew this moment mattered. This wasn't luck anymore. This was understanding. I pushed. The rock resisted slightly, then gave a sharp sound echoed, followed by a thin stream forcing its way through, just like before. Water. Another source. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Then I laughed. Not out of disbelief this time, but out of realization. He had figured it out. All of it. And now, so had I. Over the next few days, everything changed. I stopped thinking like someone who inherited land. I started thinking like someone responsible for it. Each new source I uncovered wasn't just exciting, it was strategic. I began to understand how the underground channels worked, how the pressure built up behind certain layers of rock, how the markings indicated the safest places to open them. Too much force in the wrong spot could collapse part of the wall. Too little, and nothing would happen. It required patience, focus, respect, things I had spent years avoiding in my own life, and slowly, that began to change to... I woke up earlier. I worked longer. I paid attention to details I used to ignore, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because for once, what I was doing mattered. Weeks passed. The canyon started to transform, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Where water touched the ground, the soil darkened. Where the soil stayed wet, tiny green shoots began to appear. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but I wasn't. Life was coming back. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. One evening, exhausted, I sat outside the wooden structure. Looking at the changes around me, the canyon still looked rough, still looked harsh, but it wasn't empty anymore. Neither was I. I picked up one of my grandfather's notebooks again, flipping through pages I had already read, but now I understood them differently. There were notes I had overlooked before, short sentences, fragments, thoughts he had written for himself. They'll never see it from above. It only reveals itself to those who stay. Surface lies. Depth tells the truth. I swallowed for the first time. I didn't feel angry at him. I understood him. He hadn't left because he didn't care. He had stayed here because he did, and maybe he hadn't tried to explain it because he knew something. I was only just learning now. Some things can't be explained. They have to be experienced, earned. I leaned back against the wooden wall, staring up at the sky as it slowly darkened. "You could have told me," I said quietly. The wind passed through the canyon again, softer this time, almost like an answer. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have listened anyway. That truth didn't hurt. It felt honest. The next morning, I climbed back to the top of the canyon once more. But this time, it felt different. I stood there for a long moment, looking down not at something worthless, but at something full of potential, something hidden, something alive. The same place, but a completely different perspective. I pulled out my phone again, turning it in my hand. Before, this had been the moment I would have called someone, sold it, walked away. But now I understood what he meant. Don't sell it before you understand it. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "I'm not selling," I said out loud, not because I was emotional, not because I was attached, but because it would be the biggest mistake of my life. This wasn't just land. It was a system, a hidden reservoir, a future. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was building one. I took one last look at the canyon, then turned to head back down already, planning the next steps, the next openings, the next changes. Because I knew something now that I hadn't known before. The world doesn't always hand you something valuable on the surface. Sometimes it buries it deep, and only the ones willing to dig, to stay, to understand, are the ones who ever find it. I paused halfway down the path, a sudden thought stopping me in place. A quiet realization. If this canyon had been hiding something, this